Hey, what's up guys? It's me, Sly Elliott. I really want to follow up on my most recent video that I put out because while I expected some people to not take it well, I didn't expect such a weird response. I'm also going to talk about some of the larger issues that is causing such a weird mentality and thought process regarding not only Starfield, but game reviews, Bethesda games, the console wars, and the AAA games industry as a whole. A lot of people had a really big problem with me talking about how Starfield's exploration on planets is going to have invisible barriers. A lot of people really did not like me pointing out some of the leaked footage looked like Fallout 4 or a heavily modded Fallout 4. Now, as you can see, and this is where we start to get into the issues, I had to blur all of the footage of Starfield that I got my hands on because after I posted this video, all of the Starfield footage that was circulating online started to get DMCA takedown on Twitter and YouTube and everywhere, and I really did not want my channel to get a copyright strike. Herein lies one of the at the top most nefarious things that I have a problem with regarding this game. Not only is there a review embargo for Starfield for all review outlets out there where they aren't allowed to put out their reviews too far in advance ahead of the actual public game launch, so that reviews do not affect overall sales of the game. There are a lot of review outlets that straight up did not even get review copies so that they could cover the game even when the embargo gets lifted. It seems as though either Microsoft or Bethesda, they don't want everybody to be able to even review the game fairly. A review embargo to begin with is already, I'm not going to say it's a red flag, and I'm also not going to say that it's rare because it isn't. There's a lot of big titles that come out where review embargoes are in place. Bethesda or Microsoft or both are hyper aware that this game is not going to be reviewed completely favorably by all these outlets, and so they are cherry picking the ones who they feel are going to give them the best, most positive spin on their game to increase and boost review scores at the onset of the game coming out so that more consumers read those reviews, believe it is a top tier game, and they buy the game day one or in the first week or first launch weekend, whatever, and they make the most sales. Here's an example. Metro UK is the one, a big publication that put out an article saying that they did not get a review copy, and the Metro UK has 362,000 followers on Twitter. All right, and then Stephen Ford, for example, which isn't even like a review outlet, he's like a filmmaker, Twitter personality. He has 141,000 followers. He got a review copy of Starfield. He's 100 hours into the game. So why would he get a review copy but not other publications? Why would he do that? Is it because he seems to be extremely hyped for Starfield and he seems like he's going to be probably reviewing Starfield in a very positive light? I don't know. That doesn't seem to be the best bang for your buck there, especially someone who's like not even a reviewer at all. And then to see actual Starfield copium fanboys saying, "Thank you, Xbox and Bethesda. Thank you for listening to Xbox fans and not giving some unfriendly new outlets Starfield codes." You know, Mudahar said it best. This is peak brain damage. Having this kind of mentality towards corporations selling you product is the fucking craziest amount of cope I can possibly see. This level of like divisive fanboying, console war bullshit, childish things is the same kind of stuff I saw in my comments section on my last video, which is pretty embarrassing for a lot of you guys. Because by the way, in my last video, I did not say that Starfield's going to be a terrible game. I didn't say I hate Starfield and Bethesda. I didn't say Bethesda is a bad game developer. I simply brought up concerns I had about like the aesthetic of the game, the art style, some of the similarities that I see with like Fallout 4, but I wasn't hating. I wasn't like saying ridiculous stuff off the cuff. And the amount of vitriol and hate that this garnered, cope harder, stop the salt, wait for reviews with 4K gameplay video, as if me saying anything that was not overtly the most positive thing possible is hate, is me being salty. That is the implication here from people, and it's from people who have fucking Starfield as their cover photo on YouTube. So I wonder where their bias is. LOL, PlayStation fanboys always cry. I don't even own a PlayStation. I've always been an Xbox fan. I've always been playing Xbox since day one, since the original Xbox when I was a kid, 360, everything. I have PC Game Pass now. I'm going to be playing Starfield on Game Pass when it comes out. You're spewing a bunch of shit based on nothing much at all, and you haven't even played it. If the game turns out to be good, me and my boys will absolutely troll the shit out of you. A lot of tough guys in my comments. I'm very scared. I really hope I don't get trolled by the boys. How much copium did you take? What copium? Starfield looks trash. 30 FPS, 1296p, invisible barriers, only 1,000 planets and 100 have life on them. Another Xbox failure. Cope, fanboy. Like, there's so much of this divisive shit. These comments, and then also just online in general. Look, it's not about Xbox or PlayStation. It's not about PC or console or whatever the fuck. It's just about, just like in other aspects of our life and our world, you have to try to separate the like divisive politics and like identity stuff and the factions. You have to try to separate that and see things for what they are here. Starfield is locked to 30 frames per second. It has invisible barriers when you're trying to explore open worlds, open barriers, you know? And yeah, guys, it does look a little bit like Fallout 4, a little bit of Skyrim. A lot of the animations seem like they're going to be recycled. A lot of the assets seem like they're mildly maybe recycled from Fallout 4 or reskinned. And yes, Starfield is going to be on Game Pass day one of launch. And yes, Starfield already has announced that there's going to be a DLC coming out that's been already in development called Shattered Space as an expansion, and for some reason it's just not in the game at launch, and they are going to make you pay for it. And yes, Fallout 76 had a very tough launch and was not received very well by anybody, and also has been worked on for years since it came out, and I've heard that it's become quite a serviceable game at this point, and they finally have gotten it up to a point where it should have been at launch, and that it's kind of fun now. And both of those things can be true. And yes, Microsoft has promised that Starfield has the fewest bugs of any Bethesda game, and if you guys remember, if you can just try to take off the fanboy caps, put them over your heart, and remember what it was like to play any Bethesda game at launch, you'll remember that they've been extremely buggy, sometimes broken, chock full of glitches, okay? Every game. Skyrim was like that. Fallout's like that. That's just how it's been, okay? This is coming from a developer that has a track record of releasing very buggy games, and I'm not saying that's completely even their fault. Making games, it's hard, okay? It's hard. I get it. Especially making open world games, very difficult, very easy for a lot of bugs to come up, okay? Promising it won't have bugs, it's insane. This is a developer who's pretty notorious for having very buggy releases, okay? When someone like me makes a video saying that, I think the game might be a little rough around the edges in some aspects, that should not make your head explode. That should not make smoke come out of your ears. That should not be surprising even, truly. And you're being honest with yourself. There's a lot of these things that just, they don't seem like something that you would do if you were super confident that your game was perfect, was glitchless, was as polished as could be, was as good as it could be. Maybe you wouldn't put it day one on Game Pass. Maybe you wouldn't have review embargoes and select different outlets that are going to give it favorable reviews and not the other ones. You wouldn't lock it to 30 frames per second because you couldn't get performance right at 60 frames or higher. you maybe wouldn't already be working on DLC when your whole game isn't finished and it hasn't shipped yet and it hasn't been completely and utterly QA tested to death to make sure it's perfect. And your game wouldn't be almost indiscernibly different from other games that you made almost 10 years ago, like Fallout 4. And you probably wouldn't DMCA take down any footage that didn't seem completely favorable to have circulating on the web because you were afraid of what people would actually think about your game. If that wasn't representative of your game and you were confident in your product, you wouldn't have to strong-arm anybody to take footage down because you'd be confident in your product and that it was high quality. You wouldn't think that's some kind of spoiler to the consumers as to the polish that they can expect. And I'm not saying all of this with like zero nuance, right? Multiple things can be true here. I like Bethesda games. I've sunk tons and tons of hours into games like Skyrim. I think that Todd Howard is a good, competent, passionate game developer, and I've watched and read all of his interviews, and I respect him as a creator. I think Bethesda is really good at making these fanciful adventure action RPG story-driven experiences with amazing side quest lines and super memorable characters with worlds that you can just lose hours and hours of your life to, that capture the imaginations of such a wide audience that it's almost mind-boggling. And I also think that Bethesda has shown that sometimes they can be a little unoriginal with how they approach some of their not only design decisions but also their business practices as well. I mean, this is the company who has beaten Skyrim to death. They have milked that cash cow to death. They have released 400 different versions of that game, and not every new version was better than the last. So of course, when I hear about DLC already in the pipeline, I'm a little concerned about the business thought process that Bethesda was running with when they came up with that idea. You know, was it because it's going to be an actually good expansion, or is it because they already can smell the money and they know that they can cash in so quick on this cash cow yet again? And this ultimately is still the Bethesda and the Todd Howard that we remember.
And one of the great things about having a fully dynamic game engine is all of this just works. These NPCs are not scripted. Make your player proud that he bought it. It works. It actually works perfectly. We made a real one.
Wait, what?
Mods transferred, played, and shared for free on Xbox One. And I want to be clear, actually, that feature is not coming out at launch.
Todd.
So yeah, guys, I'm a little concerned. I'm a little concerned that the game is probably going to have some performance issues, which is why it got locked to 30 frames in the first place. I'm a little concerned that some of the very grand promises of gameplay and things to do in the game is not going to translate perfectly to the final version of the game, because that has been very standard for other Bethesda games. I'm concerned the open worldliness of the game is going to be a little limited by some invisible barriers and some odd design choices and technical constraints for an engine that is a little old and is showing a little bit of age, both aesthetically and in terms of its systems. And I'm concerned about the monetization practices and the cash grabbing and the business practices of not just this company, but Microsoft and the AAA games industry in general. So when I say these things, I'm not saying them with malice. I'm not saying them with vitriol. I'm not saying them to be a hater. I'm saying them because they're rooted in a decent amount of either evidence or past data or past experience, some anecdotal, sure, some biased even, but nonetheless, it's not just coming out of nowhere. And if you dig real deep and you really ask yourself, I think you might realize that some of these things might be true, and that this game, day one at launch, might be a little buggy. It might have some performance issues, especially on PC. And that's not going to make it a bad game. It's just going to make it a game, a Bethesda game, a AAA game that we're used to. We're used to not always delivering 100% on all of their promises. But don't just get in the comments, get in these Twitter threads, and start blindly defending bad ideas, bad business practices, and billion-dollar corporations. Don't do that. Please don't do that, because it makes you look very weird. They aren't going to see this, bro. I know you hope they will, but they won't. These different fanboy clubs, these console war talking points, it's all just to divide the player base and the consumer base so that they bicker and argue with each other instead of getting mad at the people they actually should, which is the companies and corporations that take advantage of the consumer and bleed them dry for every cent they can through nefarious business practices, psychological trickery, and dark patterns. So when the horse armor company that arguably helped kick off the corporate hellscape of paid online DLC, nickel and diming consumers, makes a new video game with admitted performance issues locked to 30 frames per second, notorious for bugs at day one, and has already announced DLC, yes, I am skeptical. And you should be too. But just remember who you're really defending in the comments and in these reply threads. Remember some of the things they've done in the past. Ask yourself this: is it reasonable that some people are and maybe should be skeptical of this company's next product? And is it unreasonable that I'm not skeptical? Remember this video, and remember my last video, when you start having to pay for some sweet, sweet Starfield mods.